Okay, so I am back with Blue Review. This is episode. No, I didn't just wake up. This is episode 58. Last one I did was total video devoted solely to the Black Widow film. Um, that video didn't get as much interest as the few Blue reviews before it, which have been like really popular, relatively speaking. Especially the one on Mobius by Ki-duk. It's gotten like 230 views, and it's gotten 2 thumbs ups and also 2 thumbs down. So I'm getting ratios. So if any of you guys watched that video or intend to watch that video on Mobius that I did, Blue Review, I don't know, I guess it was 56. It was like 3 videos back, 3 Blue reviews back. Please give me a thumbs up. I've got to counteract these trolls. I mean, I can't really see why anyone would give me a thumbs down unless they just hate my style or whatever. It's like it's something, a new subscriber or just somebody who happened upon it, because I guess Mobius is, a word that's been used a lot as a name and various things. So maybe it keeps popping up that way, and then people will click on it out of curiosity, or it's hard to say. I'm going to talk about another film by the director of Mobius. But first, I want to talk about my least favorite of these 3, but I still liked it. It was The Color Out of Space, or actually Color Out of Space. It doesn't have a "the" in front of it. Directed by Richard Stanley, and I hadn't had a chance to see this one. Honestly, I hadn't had a chance to see it for free yet, but now I have. So I have a long kind of, I don't want to say history, like intimate history with this movie, but I do. I have followed its journey because in 2017, a friend of mine and I went up to Providence, Rhode Island, and attended the Necronomicon, and he was a correspondent of Richard Stanley's on Richard's Facebook group that's Terra Umbra, which is largely devoted to kind of mystical, magical stuff. And my friend has, been involved in alchemy, and Richard's been involved in all kinds of things, of course, not just filmmaking, but obviously magic and other things. So I met him at this club. He met us there. It was on a Thursday. It was kind of like I think it was Wednesday night when we first got into town. We got a hotel in Warwick, Rhode Island, and then we went into Providence. And this particular little bar, club, dive, whatever, was where there was going to be like a pre-convention party, but not many people showed up. I mean, not many people who were actually there for that party or who were attending the convention. There were kind of random people. A band called Fine played, and they had a lead singer slash guitarist named Izzy, I think, and she was awesome. And she had a female drummer. I don't remember her name. And they just really were heavy and cool. And their backdrop was Night of the Living Dead. So they played like for an hour or so. So they played most of the movie. That was because George Romero, I believe, had recently passed away back then, and they were big fans. And of course, me and my friend and Richard Stanley were all big fans, so we were all enjoying it. Richard Stanley bought me a drink, and then I later bought him a drink. So we were all sloshed, and after this, we went to a costume shop on the same street, several blocks, and it had all kinds of weird costumes, and of course, Lovecraftian stuff. Of course, this is this was the home of H.P. Lovecraft, Providence. So I took a picture with Richard in front of the house that inspired Lovecraft, that he describes within the story, the Call of Cthulhu. It's a real distant picture, and we're real tiny, but I like it. I probably should repost it on Facebook. But the thing is, Richard's really controversial these days because of these allegations that came out from his ex-girlfriend Scarlett Amaris, and Scarlett was a member of Terra Umbra too, and I friended her, but I have never interacted with her directly. Now she worked with Richard on the script for Color Out of Space, and it's the writing is credited to both of them. They were in a long-term relationship. By the time I met Richard, they had broken up, and I mean, he seemed, to still have feelings for her, but I mean, that's really not my place to say. Even if he confided in me, I'm not gonna, confide in public figures' romantic situation on a public video, um, especially since there's controversy around that whole issue of their relationship. But I want to say for the record that we hung out with Richard till like 4 a.m. Places already mentioned. We wandered. We went to the graveyard there. Some various Lovecraftian um, landmarks and that costume shop. And Richard put on a mask that was huge and it was kind of a Cthulhuoid thing. I took a picture of that too, of him in the mask. And um, so anyway, then a couple of days later, during the convention proper, um, we went to his panel, which was about Color Out of Space. So he had already told us a lot of this when we were wandering about Providence, that he had just gotten the green light and he was kind of broke, and he was, basically living off of the money he was getting for coming to the convention and waiting for the rest of his advance for the film, and then he'd kind of be out of hock. Um, he was kind of like a very eccentric kind of vagabond like figure. I mean, it was just so bizarre talking to him about like his love life and how broke he was while we're walking around drunk and high late at night in this semi mythical place. After having seen his movies Dust Devil and Hardware, and I saw Hardware in the theater, and Dust Devil is one of my favorites. But those are his only two real fiction feature films until now. So he got the green light, and during the panel, he did mention that he had one big star, but he couldn't reveal who it was. But it helped him get the funding, get the things together, and it turned out to be Nicolas Cage. And of course, Cage helped him get funding and attention, but also I believe Cage hooked him up with Spectre Vision, um, which it was a company that Elijah Wood was part of. There were like 3 or 4 producers, and he was one of them. And they produced Mandy, which I've reviewed on this channel, starring Nicolas Cage, which is pretty much my favorite film of the year it came out, which I guess was 2018, I think, 2017. So yeah, it's all kind of like a blur. I guess it was 2018, toward the end of 2018, I think. I know I watched the Blu-ray on Halloween of 2019. No, 2018. Yes, Halloween of 2018. I watched it, the Blu-ray with my friend Tim McLean. 2019, I showed it to my fiance when she lived here. So far, everyone that I've shown it to or who's seen it at least likes it, if not just loves it. It has a lot of detractors, but anyway, I've done that review. The point is, this connection got Richard a producer and a star who are already working together, and so now they're working on Richard's and Scarlett's script that they've had kicking around for a while, and the movie's going to be realized. So at the panel, he just kind of talked about his ideas. He didn't really have a lot of visual aids. A lot of stuff was not set in stone or even really completely set, but he talked about the tone he wanted to convey, what some of his ideas were. And so, as time went on, I followed both on Richard's group that I was in, updates, and also just, around the internet, on the filming of the movie and the wrapping of the movie. And it did come to Charlotte to play theatrically, and I didn't see it. It was here a week, and it seems like it's either coming out of the theater or it's either in the theater or maybe hitting home video around the time that COVID kind of started, like, taking over everything and occluding every other element of our lives. Um, so it just kind of got put off. It got marked down really low on Blu-ray where I work. I think it's $12 at one time, and I almost bought it several times, but I didn't. So I just figured I'll eventually pick it up, or see it somehow. So now I've seen it. Okay, so the movie itself, I think it's a very effective horror movie. It is like cosmic horror. A lot of it is like if you're coming into this movie and you don't know kind of Lovecraft's themes or concepts, this stuff will be kind of new to you. You won't really necessarily have a way to describe it. It's horror, but I mean, you know, a newbie's not going to watch it and go cosmic horror. They're Lovecraftian. And people who are Lovecraftian, of course, are going to criticize it harshly. They're going to hold it to a big standard because there haven't been that many. There have been quite a few now Lovecraftian films made. That was not the case when I was growing up. When I was growing up, the only one was Haunted Palace by Roger Corman, which is based on the case of Charles Dexter Ward, which I still think is one of the finest of the Lovecraft adaptations. And then when I was still pretty young, Reanimator came out, and then kind of from there, Stuart Gordon did some stuff, and then the '90s and 2000s. The 2000s, there was the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, and they began doing these kind of homage films, like adaptations, but especially like Call of Cthulhu. The conceit was that it was actually a film made in the silent era or in the 30s, around the time it was written. Yeah, it's from the late 20s, and so it was kind of a faux period. A kind of a faux document from another time. So it had the black and white and the different intertitles and stuff. Um, so it didn't have a modern sensibility. It obviously didn't have this like hard edge like Stuart Gordon's movies did. It was more whimsical, and I don't want to say whimsical, but yeah, more nostalgic. You know, still having some menace, but it didn't really have a lot of that baleful, dread that Lovecraft is, like the grand master of, was, is, always will be, maybe. There was a German adaptation during this same period. I'm talking now, we're getting into like the 2010s when there was a lot of Lovecraft conventions like the one I attended were beginning, and the whole thing online, the community was exploding, and a lot of uh, they called them the new weird wave of writers were coming up, and they were doing pastiche of Lovecraft or cosmic horror or things influenced by Lovecraft. But then about in the mid 2010s, that they all kind of turned against Lovecraft because of his racism, because they were all kind of vast majority of them are kind of neoliberal Democrats, and they just thought he was too politically incorrect. But they didn't mind making a career off of being inspired by, or I mean, outright imitating his work. To me, if you hate a writer on a general principle of morally and don't want to be associated with them, don't work in their sandbox. Um, I probably have mentioned this before on this video, maybe not. It's on my channel, but I really despise the Lovecraftian scene in America that's online. There's some good people in it, some talented people, but generally it's just a horrible clique with overrated uh, writers, very uptight people who they think they're really hip and liberal, but they're really very uptight and conservative, which that's the whole neoliberal kind of thing right now. The Republicans of the 1980s are now the Democrats of the 2020s. But I'm not going to get into the politics of it. But unfortunately, those people became inextricably linked in with politics because of their protesting against Lovecraft's racism so much. Okay, so the guy's been dead like 80 years, and some people are like, well, he was a product of his time, and then they're like, I don't buy that, and I'm the same way. I don't buy that either. I don't buy that excuse. My mom used to say that about my dad, who was a lot older than her and was a racist, where she wasn't. No, I don't buy that product of his time thing, but the point is his time's long past, and he was not a very a socialized person, and he did harbor a lot of ignorant beliefs. Now, near the end of his life, allegedly he loosened up a little, but he only lived to 47 years. He died in 1937, and who knows what would have happened? I don't know. I mean, the 40s and 50s weren't exactly, peaks of civil rights breakthroughs, so he might not have really changed much at all had he lived longer. But anyway, I almost with no exceptions do separate the art from the artist. Um, Even some of these people I'm discussing, the ones of them that have talent in their work, I have given them props, their work. Because to me, the art moves kind of through you. I've talked about this in my own Flickr Street videos. It's almost like we're a conduit for it. The problem with a lot of those writers is it doesn't feel that way. It doesn't feel authentic. It's very contrived. And to me, standard horror fiction has gone as far as it's going to go. Now, some people might disagree with me, and there may be some definite exceptions. I have some friends who are a bit more well read in that realm overall than me, like Tim McLean, my good buddy. And so, I'm not an authority, but just based on what I've surveyed of the new weird movement and its kind of spin offs, it originally started in the early 2000s, and there were people like China Mieville and Vandermeer or whatever, the guy who wrote Annihilation, uh, and which was made into a great movie. And even he admitted that um, Alex Garland's ending to the movie, which some people loved and some people hated, he said it was superior to his own. And yeah, Alex Garland I think is a better writer. Not that Vandermeer's not. I can't even think of his whole name. You know what I'm talking about. Jeff Vandermeer maybe. But anyway, those guys spawned kind of a legion of like fans and sycophants and followers who kept on going into the 2010s, and that became kind of they still were attached to the term new weird. I called them the neo weirdos, and a lot of their detractors did too. And for my talking about neo conservatism, neo liberalism, neo Nazism, you can probably guess I'm not a fond of all of neo ethos. I mean, it's just a coincidence, I guess, with the word, but the neo weirdos are neo liberals and neo conservatives. Uh, but they are anti neo Nazi because they're always like, what's the term, virtue signaling about such things. So slamming Lovecraft as a racist was really something that they really, really held. They even got his the bust for the horror awards, which had his visage on it. They had it removed and replaced after however many years it had been the thing, and that kind of put a permanent split down that thing. But basically, I blocked all those people on social media, and I fell out with a guy who had once been my best friend. He wasn't my best friend during this period, but we were getting along somewhat, and he was kind of not well liked by the neo weirdos, and he is a talented writer. I'll give him that. They had kind of a feud, and I took his side, but it wasn't just because I'd known him so long; he'd been my friend. Um, I honestly agreed with his ideological differences with them, though I disagree with many of his ideological differences too. I mean, there's things I maybe agree more with the neo weirdos than I do with him. But in general, as far as it goes, I was more in his camp. So anyway, when I stopped talking to him, which was forced by a horrible thing he did to me, for good, I'd already started blocking out those people. Some of them were stalking me, some of them were harassing me, uh, some of them were trying to insinuate themselves into my divorce, which was going on because my ex-wife was kind of a hanger on to that scene also, um, though not a participant creatively. So yeah, so the Necronomicon that I went to could have been really awkward because some of those people were there, but it wasn't awkward. Thanks to my friend Scott that took me there and Richard Stanley. and they made it a lot nicer and more bearable, and I could kind of home in on the things I enjoyed about uh, Lovecraftiana. Is that a word? I don't know. Lovecraftian kind of stuff. It's a personal love of mine. I mean, I don't. When I was getting into Lovecraft, it wasn't like a click. I mean, there were no internets though, interwebs. But sorry, and so that's obviously expanded it and everything. I mean, Lovecraft's more famous than ever, but he's been dead a long time. But his work's still incredible. Now, I haven't read The Color Out of Space since I was maybe 18, 19 years old. Um, but I do remember reading it around the same time as Shadow Out of Time. Is that the one? Which I think is a better story, which is an amazing story. The Color of Space is really incredible too. However, it's been so long since I've read it that I don't remember exactly the plot details. I do have a tome, compilation of Lovecraft, most of his work, so I'll probably try to reread it and compare. But I know the movie is basically just conceptually an adaptation, and the names of the characters, I think some are from the story, and then some are from other Lovecraft stories as like little homages that are sly, but they're not in your face like some directors who do that kind of thing, where they name a whole bunch of characters after artists who've worked on those characters or properties. It can get a little egregious and annoying and cutesy. But that's not how Richard does it. It's very low key. I mean, you might not even know. Like I said, if you're not in Lovecraft, you wouldn't have any idea. So basically, it's about the color out of space. I mean, the premise is they're a family on this farm. Nicolas Cage and Jolie Richardson, uh, Vanessa Redgrave's daughter. They're the couple, and they have two kids, three kids. Yeah, they have three kids, two boys, uh, one little boy, and then a medium-sized boy. Anyway, the older child is a daughter. I guess she's supposed to be in her late teens. She's very beautiful. I forgot the name of the actress. Her character is a Wiccan, kind of a witch. Like she's kind of like a lot of people who get into that in that age and that scene is that, she's kind of a lone practitioner, as they would say, and just kind of feeling her way through it and really entranced by the imagery and I don't think she's like a serious witch, a serious magician or sorcerer, uh, that's the ironic thing is, because she's kind of fascinated with and dabbling in extra normal concepts, and then of course they're going to come to her doorstep, and it's going to have a different outcome probably than she definitely worse than she would have anticipated doing her spells in the woods and everything. I like her. There's a guy who's infatuated with her. I think he's like a surveyor, like a meteorologist, or he surveys the land. He's a young guy. He's an African American character, so obviously he was changed from the story. Sorry, um, but he is the narrator, though it's very sparse, but it's effective because the narration that is in it is almost verbatim from the story. Um, he comes upon the daughter. Her name's Lavinia, which is named after another character in Lovecraft, and I've totally forgotten from which one. I may be Color of Space, but tend to think it's the one that. Uh, hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the character in Curse of the Crimson Altar, which was the second Lovecraft adaptation, Barbara Steele. I forgot which that one was based on. Maybe the Dunwich. No, what was that one based on? Maybe that was based on the Color of Space. There was Die Monster Die with Boris Karloff, and that was based on the Color of Space. So the concept, is the same. There's a meteorite. There's a meteorite and it hits Earth, and basically it, infests and contaminates all of the land and everything around it. Bit by bit, it contaminates the water, it contaminates, vegetation, and its energy kind of is like there's part of it in this well, and the energy's kind of coming out, almost like a sentient being. Um, you're not quite sure if it is sentient, but anyway, it does have a spectrum of color that's off the human eye chart. Richard talked about that during the panel, he was going to try his best to replicate that. I personally don't think he quite was able to get what he wanted visually with that, because it's just, how do you do that? How do you? I mean, it's one thing you read a Lovecraft story and you go, and it's indescribable, and the unfathomable, and color, unknown to the human eye. I mean, that sounds awesome as literature, but how do you visualize that kind of stuff? Um, it's been hard for people to visualize the kind of monsters and creations of Lovecraft, varying degrees of success. I think Richards is one of the most successful. It's certainly one of my favorites by far. Lovecraft adaptation easily. I don't know. I don't really rank them like a lot of Lovecraftians do, but I have seen the vast majority of them. There was a Color Out of Space German adaptation in the 2010s, an indie film, which was also called Die Farbe. I did not like that movie. Tried to get into it. My ex-wife loved it. I didn't get into that. This is far superior, and it's superior to Die Monster Die, though that's a kind of a fun movie. So, not being a fanatical, obsessive Lovecraftian like a lot of people I'm alluding to, much less Richard is really a scholar of Lovecraft. Not to the level of, say, H.S.T. Joshi, who is like the premier scholar of Lovecraft, but to that, to a high degree. He knows his shit, in other words. Nicolas Cage is Nicolas Cage. I mean, he kind of plays a character maybe a few years older than he is, though he tends to usually play characters a little younger than he is, because he's in, I believe, his early to mid 50s. And Jolie Richardson, I think she's in her late 40s or early 50s. She looks very old, though. I mean, she looks really old. I assume that's how she really looks, and it's not makeup. But I thought she was kind of a bad choice for the wife. But then again, maybe not. Maybe they wanted to have older woman, younger man dynamic, and have her be this kind of dissipated looking figure. But and that gets worse. The little kid, when the kind of meteorite lights up, they're all trying to figure out what's happening. Oh, it also affects the animals. They have stables with alpacas and horses and things, and they have a dog that I think the dog falls in the well. So you might be like me, and your mind might be racing ahead and going, okay, so it's distorting everything, including the animals. So the first thing I thought of was John Carpenter's The Thing, with the first shot where you see all the dogs kind of melding together with the thing. And there is a scene like that toward the end with the alcalpas. It's, if I'm saying that right. So it's definitely an homage, but it's really cool because they're such strange looking animals. It's great. The effects are great. Like I said, he didn't quite render the color the way he wanted, but it was still great. It was a great part of the spectrum. The kind of magenta, kind of purple, magenta, lavender colors along that spectrum, which is really my favorite kind of colors. Purple and all its variants are my favorite colors, and they're most pleasing to my eye personally, and to me they're underused a lot of times in fantasy. I hate that they're underused so much in the MCU movies and things, because I think some of the characters would look cool in purple. But they do have Kang the Conqueror now, and he will be largely purple. So, yes. So, I grew up on Prince, Purple Rain, Purple Haze, and all that. But it's been my favorite color most of my life. So it's on that end, but it is kind of wonky, weird looking. It's obviously been kind of digitally manipulated, and the light is kind of blinding. So I guess I probably haven't really told the plot very well. I mean, there's really not. Really, the first 20 minutes are kind of a drag. I mean, I don't mean they're awful, but to me, I wasn't really interested in any of the characters. A little bit in Lavinia, the witch girl, but not the other characters. I thought Cage's character he gives a very mannered performance. At times, it's his mannered, and even has a similar accent as the one he gave in Vampire's Kiss decades ago. But it's not that over the top. I mean, it's pretty restrained for Nicolas Cage. But as the movie goes on, and as this thing starts to affect them, of course, naturally, it's a Lovecraft story, and so it's going to drive some people mad. Insanity is a big part of that. You know, these forces from beyond, another Lovecraft story, a movie. They drive humans to insanity. The human brain can't comprehend or collate the content, the sum of its contents. That's a paraphrase of one of, I believe, Lovecraft's quotes. If the human mind could ever collate the sum of its contents, and then after I got the rest, it's basically like something awful would happen. Like you die of shock. No, but when Nicolas Cage starts really getting affected by it, he does do those cage rage things, and he does do kind of like he did in Mandy. But I think in both these movies, yeah, it's a shtick, and people expect it of him. But really, in the context of both of these movies, uh, it's warranted, and it's even realistic. Yeah, it's over the top, but like in Mandy, he's just lost his wife. She's like been burned to death into ashes, and he's in the bathroom, half naked, and he just starts screaming, and he's like, ah, ah, ah. And see, that's how people are in real life when they are at the end of their tether. They don't have a dramatic scream or a melodic scream or exact perfect tears. Uh, they just kind of bellow it out. It's just like this, primal, literally a primal scream. And that's kind of what he does in Mandy. In this movie, he does it several times, and sometimes it is over frustration. Like they can't get away from this place. The car breaks down, and he kind of loses it. And one of many times he loses it, and it's kind of realistic. I mean, in real life, actually, you could get that frustrated with your car conking out if you were trying to run from somebody, and you probably would break down like that. The most odious thing that happens really is when the meteorite energy or whatever lights up in this arc and it hits the wife and the young son, who's been kind of spellbound by the color anyway, the son, and it hits them both, and it does what it does to the alcalpas later, and what it's doing to everything around it. It changes it like on the molecular level, and basically it fuses the two of them together. And that's when I think the terror elements become really powerful. The imagery is just really grotesque because yes, you have the mother kind of like this, and then the kid is facing the other way. It's kind of like the Exodus album cover, Bonded in Blood. Anyway, but yeah, that's gross. Like they're back to back and they're fused together and they're naked and mostly naked anyway, and they're incoherent. They're in pain. I mean, it's like they're kind of out of their minds. I mean, it's like, what would you be like if you were like fused to another person, much less your child, like painfully fused to them and couldn't get free, and your body was all fucked up and it couldn't obey your commands. And so she's like not quite intelligible as a human. She tries to talk a little bit. Cage is pretty stoic about it. He handles it the best anyone could handle something like this. And he does decide that he's going to put this composite creature, two members of his family, out of its misery with a shotgun. But then he changes his mind, and he gets soft-hearted, and he kind of starts deluding himself that he's gonna save them. But unfortunately, this being springs into action and tries to kill the daughter, and yeah, I believe Cage blows it away if I'm correct. There's also like a cop that comes in here, and there's also Tommy Chong as this kind of shaman-like character who lives near Nicolas Cage, and they get to him, and he's been taken over and warped. The cop ends up getting killed, and just as one thing after another. But it really goes into high gear, and it's kind of one of those things. It really did remind me of a lot of the better '80s horror movies. It's kind of like what The Void, I think, was trying to be, but didn't quite achieve. But I still liked The Void. Don't get me wrong. But I think Richard's a master. Now this doesn't look or feel like any of his other movies, his other two fictional films, at all. It doesn't look like what I've seen of his footage of Island of Dr. Moreau, though it is a little closer to that look. A little, I don't want to say slicker, but a little more clean. Not quite as much that kind of raw feel of Hardware and Dust Devil. So yeah, some gruesome imagery, and it just starts getting out of control, and it's one by one the characters start getting knocked out, and even when Cage is dead, the thing, the energy, the being, the color, whatever, reanimates him, and just a lot of gruesome imagery I really liked. And the surveyor kid comes back, and he kind of tries to save the day, and really he ends up being the sole survivor, and his mind is fucked up, and so he's narrating the outro of the movie with the Lovecraftian monologue, and it's very effective because his character's like absent for whole chunks of the movie. But he's kind of like the inroad character, and to be fair, he really is kind of the most logical character. So I guess he's kind of like the audience identification character. Now I also think the character that we're supposed to be emotionally most sympathetic toward is Lavinia. But yeah, she doesn't make it. Spoilers. I put spoilers on here anyway. So overall, I loved it. I would like to own it. I don't think it's a masterpiece uh, of its kind. I think as a Lovecraftian movie adaptation, it's probably a masterpiece. As far as stacked against Richard's other movies or movies along the same lines or what I like in movies, I wouldn't call it a masterpiece, but I do think it's really good. I want to watch it again and I want to go through the first 20 minutes and see if there's more nuance that I missed, because it just seemed like it was kind of moving slow, and then it starts to happen. But once things get going, it's very compelling. So I would recommend it. Okay, so and for the record, I'm still friends with Richard on Facebook. I haven't taken any sides in his problem with Scarlett. Makes a compelling case, but um, for now, I still consider Richard a friend. I'm not condoning anything he may have done in his private, personal relationship, which is none of our business. Um, but there's really no proof of that as of yet. So I'm going to believe him until there's proof to the contrary. I'm not going to hold up like a big banner and be like, "Save Richard" and "Screw Scarlett." I'm not going to be like that, like a partisan. But I don't have a camp because I never really knew Scarlett. But I empathize with her cause, whatever she's doing it for, why, or what made it happen. If it was really horrible things or other motivations. Um, I'm empathetic with her, but Richard is my friend, and he really has been a good friend. He's really one of the few really accomplished creative people that I really would consider a friend. That really treats me with respect and dignity, and so it's hard to reconcile that. But I know like I said, people's personal, private relationships. It's stuff that's really beyond other people. Other people are never gonna. I don't think other people are ever going to be able to understand or see everything that happens within a very passionate, intimate relationship that they're on the outside of. I know I've had very passionate relationships, and a lot of outsiders have been really obnoxious towards me and my partner, and they didn't understand a lot of the elements of it, the good or bad. Some people eventually, became more sympathetic and understanding. Like when I got a divorce, things were a little more cut and dried with what happened at the end. And a lot of my friends have been divorced, or her parents are divorced, and so it was a more relatable. But I've had some crazy relationships with crazy people when I was crazy. So these aren't judgments. There's observations, descriptors, and so I don't think anyone else can really know or adequately judge. So if there's a truth, an objective truth to this, then it's going to have to be played out in a court of law, which that looks like where it's headed. So that's the last I want to talk about that subject, I guess, ever. But okay, so the next movie, it's called Pieta by Ki-duk, the guy who did Mobius, unconventional, wild South Korean director. This one, I first watched like the first half hour of it, and it went. I was kind of really entranced by it. I mean, I was really interested in what was going to happen next, and then some really shocking things happened. Big surprise from this guy, right? From the filmmaker, especially if you've seen my Mobius review or the film, or some of his other films for that matter. But then I kind of put it aside for a little while and kind of ruminated on it. Distracted myself with other movies like The Color Out of Space. Um, and then when I came back to it, though, I thought I was going to be kind of picking it up and it was going to be a languid view, but it wasn't. I mean, I was riveted for like the last hour of it till the end. It's a low key movie. You know, it's not sensationalistic or over dramatic. It's not as surreal or bizarre, almost to a humorous level that Mobius gets at times, even though it also has an uncomfortable, awkwardness to it, of course, given the subject matter, and very dark at times. This movie is pretty much all dark. Um, so you have a guy who's a loan shark, and he he loans out money, and then when the people can't repay him, which is invariably the way it ends up, uh, he he coerces them into him crippling them in some way, like shattering their hand or their leg or their foot or cutting off a limb, something so they can never really fully work functionally again. That's their punishment. But it's also he has these insurance policies on them that he um, cashes out because of their injury. I mean, I think they get some of it, but he gets something from it too, and so he gets repaid whatever he's owed off the top of the insurance kickback. So yeah, pretty loathsome character. After you see how he treats this poor family man guy, is really he's like, I need help, but I'll be crippled, but I just need you to help me with the money, and and it's just people in desperation, people kind of on the underbelly of society. So there's a lot of characters like this that he has kind of fucked up, with his little modus operandi. I can't remember the name of the character or the actor. He's intense though. So like the first like 20 minutes, I just hate this guy. I want to, kill him. And I just assumed he was going to be the villain. Well, Ki-duk does what a lot of ambitious writers try to do, which is take a character that seems irredeemable and make them somewhat sympathetic, even though against your better judgment. And I think a skilled writer can really do it. It can really put you in that weird place where, but this guy, he's like so evil, but oh God, this is why he's like this. And in real life, I wish things were that simple and people were that redeemable. But in my cynical, jaded opinion, I don't think they are. But in films and in fiction, yes, you can play with that dynamic. And, I just got finished watching Loki, the series, and that character is kind of that theme in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The character who has really done some awful things, but you're really kind of seeing what the root of it is, and you're really kind of end up hoping for his redemption. You kind of like him despite himself, despite yourself. Now, I'm not going to say I like this character in uh, Pieta, but I did empathize with him. He did show a range of emotion, and what happens essentially is his mother comes back into his life. She had given him away as an infant. She begs him to accept her. He's very bitter, and you can tell already that's part of the root of his kind of evil. And it gets really crazy. I mean, he tries to get rid of her, and she like begs him to accept her, and then he rapes her. I don't know. I mean, he says, well, if I came out of there, I'm going to go back in. And he's like, I think he's kind of drunk and just out of control. But she doesn't leave after that. She's in shock, kind of, but he's in shock too. And I was seriously in shock. I was like, God, what next? Man, this just guy never lets up. Um, if you get all the way to the end of the movie, though, that scene loses a little bit of its shock, putting things into the perspective of things, because there are a lot of uh, little twists that kind of build towards a big twist, which really took me off guard. But suffice to say, he tries to become a better person, and being with his mother helps. And they have a kind of weird relationship. I mean, it's kind of like mother and son, and kind of like he's almost regressed to a little boy, and she's nurturing him. But then there is a sexual tone there, there's the incestuous part there, which also was reminiscent of Mobius, I guess. And I think that's in maybe another one or two of Kim Ki-duk's films. There's that incest taboo kind of thing, and he's very skillful at manipulating your feelings about it. By the end of the movie, his mom, well, halfway second act of the movie, his mom disappears. He thinks she's been kidnapped by some enemies of his, like his boss is a loan shark. Then he thinks of some of the many people he's wronged, getting revenge, and he goes around to them. And the thing is, he doesn't hurt them. The people he's crippled, even though he's angry and thinks they may have kidnapped or maybe even killed his mother, he stops himself short. In other words, he can't. The violence has kind of gone out of him. He knows he's done wrong. I mean, it's really a profound change, and maybe it would be hard to believe in reality, but this guy pulls it off. The actor and the director pull it off totally effectively and convincingly. The mother resurfaces, and then you get a series of twists that are pretty devastating to the main character. Some of them he never really learns the whole truth. We learn to the audience, but it doesn't end well. I would normally give spoilers, maybe, but I really think this is one that it's hard to sum up. The twist is so unexpected. To me, it was anyway. Um, and it's so fucked up and so wrong. Even to this guy, it was wrong. Even a guy that messed up, it was like, wow, man. But then you're like, well, maybe he deserved this. But these are like primal themes. Like he just wants to be loved, and he's abandoned as a baby, and he, becomes bitter and hard, and starts to exploit other people who are less fortunate than him, feeling slight bit of power over them. Uh, yeah, it's like a psychological, very like psychological horror, dark psychological drama, much like Mobius was, only not quite as a little more believable, not quite as over the top. I mean, everything in Mobius could really happen, but some of it was really stretching into the absurdism. Anyway, this was a powerful movie, and I liked it a lot better even than I thought I was going to. Um, some people are kind of lukewarm on it, and I kind of get that. It's kind of stilted for the first little bit, but it captured my attention, and when I revisited it, I couldn't stop watching it. So I'm gonna probably go over an hour here, but I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the third movie, which was my favorite of these three. I guess probably the most popular of these three by far among like cult film fans, fans of recent modern kind of cult films, because all these movies came out. Well, I don't know when Pieta came. I think they all came out in the 2010s. I'm pretty certain. Um, so last one is Only Lovers Left Alive by Jim Jarmusch, and I have not seen a lot of Jim Jarmusch's like key indie movies. Like I've never seen Night on Earth or Stranger Than Paradise. I've seen Down by Law. Uh, I've seen his Iggy Pop and the Stooges documentary, which is really good. And then I've seen a couple of his that are kind of like his genre. He's done a series of movies that I would call his genre homages. They're not really like indie drama comedies, kind of eccentric. They're more like he takes a genre like a western or horror, science fiction, whatever. Well, I don't think he's done a science fiction one yet. Action, and he puts his spin on it. And he did it with Dead Man, which was kind of a revisionist western with Johnny Depp done in black and white. That was a really good movie. And then Ghost Dog, which is kind of a Forrest Whitaker was a modern samurai working for some criminals and trying to maintain his honor, and it has a lot of action and some hip hop elements. And I loved that one. I loved Ghost Dog. That just recently came out on Criterion, I believe, Blu-ray. The next genre kind of homage film of his, I haven't seen The Dead Don't Die, which was a zombie comedy, I believe. Some people love it and some people hate it. I don't know. But this one is definitely still in that kind of vein. This is a vampire movie, and Amazon. Did I watch it on Amazon? Or did I watch it on Tubi? I think I watched it. I watched it on Amazon Prime. And Amazon Prime has these like notations at the side of their movies while you're watching them. You can light on them and read like trivia and cast members. And they make a big deal about how it's clearly a vampire movie, but the word vampire is never uttered once in the film. It's like, yeah, like Near Dark and Ganja and Hess and quite a few other vampire movies that are clearly vampire movies, but the word is never uttered. So that's nothing revolutionary that Jarmusch did there. And I doubt he thought it was either. It's just one of those things, you can latch on to and go, oh, that's kind of funny. But I don't think it's groundbreaking. The movie itself, it's turned out to be very popular among people I know. I have a film group, and a lot of people in the group have seen it well before I did and really liked it. I was curious about it largely because it had Tom Hiddleston, who played Loki, and also was in High Rise, and I've reviewed both of those on this channel, so everybody knows I'm a Tom Hiddleston fan. This was one of the key films of his that I hadn't seen. It came out not long after Avengers, I believe, maybe a year after Avengers. And he still has long black hair, even longer. It's probably a wig, but he's kind of a gothed out dude. And, but he's a vampire, and he actually lived in the time of Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley and Mary Shelley, knew all of them, the decadents, the poets. And he's that kind of person. And he's obsessed with art and the advancing technology in the arts, especially music and artifacts like vintage kind of devices and technology and vintage guitars he collects and other musical instruments. And he records his music on a reel to reel. He uses some modern technology, but he kind of like wires things together that wouldn't necessarily work. Some of his gadgets are pretty clever, but he's a totally insular guy. He lives in Detroit in the current day, and he doesn't really go out. He has sources for the blood he needs, and one is a doctor played by Jeffrey Wright. He has kind of a little small eccentric role. And Jeffrey Wright, I don't know that he's quite figured out that he's a real vampire or not, but he seems to suspect that our character Adam, Tom Hiddleston, at least thinks he himself is a real vampire. And Jeffrey Wright's doctor character seems amused by this. There's a lot of little eccentric touches here and there. There are some comedic little touches that are endemic to a lot of Jarmusch's work. They're not like, they don't take you out of the movie. They're not, incongruous. I feel like the tone of the movie is something you have to settle into. A good friend of mine said he didn't really like the tone, and I get that. I mean, because I said to him, well, I can't really tell if Jarmusch is parodying goth culture or if he's celebrating it, and I can't really. But to me, the characters are so well drawn and realize that that's the engine that moves it. These other sides and conceptual things and subtextual things really are just there for you to look at or ignore, and it's not an action movie. It's not like a bloody horror movie. I mean, you do see a lot of blood, but they always drink it in these nice little glasses. And when I say they, I mean Adam has a mate named Eve, and that wasn't a biblical thing. Apparently, it was from Mark Twain's book called Something Adam and Eve, which was the same characters from the Bible. But Eve is played by Tilda Swinton, and her character lives in Tangier in the modern day, and she's kind of the opposite of Adam. She's instead of kind of like a mopey goth, who's kind of like sullen and self-absorbed. He fits that stereotype. She kind of is more of the adventurer, decadent, try new things all the time. Both of them are obsessed with knowledge and they're autodidacts. They're people who have spent centuries learning like everything there is to learn about certain disciplines and arts. They have highly developed senses, some of which is supernatural, I think, and some of it's honed over time. Her character, is a little more fun. And actually, I've seen Tilda Swinton in quite a few movies, and I rarely like her in any movies. She's a very talented actress, but she kind of gets on my nerves because most of the characters I've observed are characters that I personally don't find sympathetic. They grate on me in some way or another. And I was like, is that her, or is it the characters, or just the way she handles certain kinds of characters? She's not like that in this movie. She has none of those kind of ticks in this movie. Her character's pretty much, I don't want to say an open book, but pretty straightforward, clear, especially if you know anything about vampire lore or any of this kind of culture stuff I'm talking about. She's she slots smoothly into that dynamic, into that kind of um, hmm, I'm running out of words. But she is who she is. I mean, and she's likable and she loves living, even though I guess they're undead. But I mean, she loves living. She doesn't want to die, and they've refined their routine to where they like she has a sources for blood too. And Tangier, an old friend of hers, played by John Hurt, who's excellent as always, steals the movie. He helps hook her up with the good stuff, which is untainted, uncontaminated blood. And they speak a bit about how diseases and different things have gotten into the blood and how it's unhealthy, obviously, for them to drink it. But she manages to keep a supply, just as Adam does. They each have their kind of source. So Adam's really lonely and he's contemplating suicide. He has a friend of his played by the late Anton Yelchin. It's really good in this. Kind of his buddy, a human. They call the humans zombies. He says, "You're pretty, he's pretty cool. He's pretty nice for a zombie or whatever." Um, and I like their camaraderie. And his name's Ian. And Ian is kind of like his go-to guy. He kind of hooks him up with uh, it hooks him up with like musical stuff and technological stuff and like things he needs that are like on the black market or whatever. He doesn't hook him up with the blood, but he hooks him up with like everything else he needs because the guy's a total shut in. So Ian's like his, errand boy, and also a guy who knows everybody, has all these underground connections. But he's a real upbeat, happy kind of guy. He's not like Adam. He's not like a goth or a dark or criminal kind of character. He's kind of like a jovial kind of grunge guy, and he manages to get a special item made for Adam, which is a wooden bullet encased in brass, hardest wood on Earth, supposedly. And of course, Adam knows all about all the strains of wood and the scientific names of them and everything. I mean, they're just Adam and Eve are just filled with all of this ephemera, and as somebody who kind of has my head stuffed with a bit of it, nothing like this, uh, and it's off-putting to a lot of people. I really liked that about them. I really sympathize with them. I was like, I get it, I really get it, and I just haven't had centuries to indulge it, but um, they have, and it's realistically done. And speaking of centuries, now from the background in the script, it's not explicitly said in the movie, but Eve is about 2,000 years old. Adam is about 500 or 600 years old. So he was, like a couple of hundred years old when he knew, like Lord Byron, for instance. So he was born kind of in medieval, going into the Enlightenment period. And so that's obviously made a strong, permanent influence on him. He's a dandy. Um, he's really good. Uh, and it's ironic because, they're lovers, but now the actors, Tilda Swinton is about 20 years older, at least, than Tom Hiddleston in real life. She's a little bit older than I thought she was, and I looked it up, and he's a little bit younger than I thought he was. So yeah, she's older to be his mother, and she kind of looks old enough to be his mother. And even in vampire years, 2,000 to 500, yeah, she's a cradle robber, um, and that's great because always see the older, mentoring, artistic or powerful kind of males, and they've got the young, kind of attractive, romanticized young woman. So now it's reversed gender wise, and I like that, and that's pretty cool. Um, so the plot just kind of ambles along. She doesn't want him to kill himself, so she goes and meets him in Detroit, and they have some great times together. But then her much younger sister, played by Mia Wasikowska, I can't say her name. She was in Stoker by Park Chan-wook, and I liked her in that. I didn't care for her that much in this, but her character is really a plot device. She's not really a real rounded character. and she's a predictable plot device. She's the troublemaking, mischievous, you know, doesn't give a fuck, relative, and for some insane reason, which people are like this in real life, obviously, Tilda Swinton has this soft spot for her because she's family, though they kind of hint that maybe they're not children of the exact same parents biologically. They might be tied by blood on a vampire level, like maybe the same person turned both of them, and that's like their father or mother vampire. This is just my theory, but there's like hints there. Um, and she fucks everything up. She can't control her bloodlust. She's like an addict. Because when they drink, it's like they take heroin or morphine or OxyContin. They bliss out. Uh, and it's wonderfully done, wonderfully shot, and it really it's perfect. I've never taken heroin, but I have had opiates, and yeah, it is that feeling. Just everything's fine. For a minute, there's no pain. I understand why people become addicts. I don't consider myself one, but I'm lucky. Um, she is like a real addict, though. I mean, she can't control herself, and she like steals a lot of their blood that we saw them so diligently getting earlier in the movie from their sources, and she drinks most of it, and then she gets so out of control that she kind of semi seduces Ian, and Adam's like telling Ian leave, go home, and Ian's kind of respects and is afraid of Adam. Adam's kind of his liege or whatever. So he intends to leave, but he gets kind of tired and a little enamored of her, and I knew what was going to happen. They're going to wake up and they're going to find out that she's bit Ian and drank every bit of his blood, and that's exactly what happens. It was a predictable part of the movie. I admit, maybe that's just the way I think from watching so many of these kind of movies and writing these kind of stories. But yeah, she didn't turn him. She didn't stop till he was void of blood, and so they boot her out, and that's kind of that. There's no more raging conflict or action or drama. It's just pretty much like Adam is like, put this foot down. He's like, just get the fuck out. And she's like, okay, fine, and so they have to dispose of Ian's body. And you can tell that Adam is a little saddened. I mean, part of it is probably he's going to have to find a new source for these things, but also he kind of was his friend. But then the other thing is, look at what condition they're in. I mean, she's like trashed part of their house. She's taken most of their blood. They don't want to get caught for murder. So they decide to leave Detroit and all their stuff together. And when Eve tells Adam, we need to leave, just pack a bag. And he's like, but what about my musical instruments? And I was like, oh my God, he's a collector. I totally get this guy. I mean, and it is, he had some incredible stuff, and you do get attached to material stuff, especially if you use it to create art. It does become indispensable to you because then you have to go on and place it. But they both are independently wealthy. They both carry on large wads of cash. So they decide to go to Tangier, and her friend, played by John Hurt, has a connection to get them some more blood, and they're gonna just skip out together there for a while. And when they get the fresh blood, they'll be kind of rejuvenated and be over this bad patch and start over, which they've probably done many times over the centuries. Unfortunately, her friend, by the way, her friend she calls him Kit, which is a nickname for Christopher Kit Marlowe, and he is the Christopher Marlowe, and he actually wrote all of Shakespeare's work. So that's like a concrete plot point in there. He's wonderful in this, John Hurt, and but he's John Hurt. But he's sick. He's gotten some unclean blood, and it's killing him. And he's kind of aged. Who knows how old he really is in centuries? Because physically, he already looks like an old man. So it's kind of sad. He's on the way out, and kind of they are too, because they're kind of out of luck. And it's very romantic, though, kind of near the end, because Eve takes all of Adam's remaining wad of cash and buys him this exotic kind of musical instrument. It's kind of like a stringed instrument. I guess probably native to Tangier, or that part of the world. I like those instruments, and it's like they're kind of resigned because they basically they don't interact with the zombies on this intimate level. They get their blood, clean blood, uh, from various sources. They don't murder humans anymore. They don't prey on them as cattle. Um, they have a very refined existence and a routine that keeps them alive so they can pursue all these interests of theirs. And wouldn't that be cool if you were immortal and rich and you could do that? And that's exactly what they do. And they're not like these monstrous like predators for centuries sucking humans dry. I mean, are trying to conquer the world or conquer humans or whatever. Many schemes that Dracula, etc., have had in many works of fiction. They're not fucking with anybody. They just want to be left alone. Especially Adam wants to be left alone. But they're deeply in love. They've been in love for however many hundreds of years, and they're resigned to their fate. And it's a little sad. Uh, and they see this really beautiful Moroccan couple who are kind of making out, um, and they kind of you know have this look at each other like maybe it's our only choice. We might as well try it. Uh, and so they leap out. It's like a jump scare end where you've seen their fangs a couple of times. But you really see them in vampire mode just real quick, and that's the movie. And so there are predictable elements in this movie, and yet there are also some uh, nice wrinkles on things that we've seen before in these kind of movies. And I love the cast. I love the look of the movie, and I really love the culture, all the references to culture, to music and literature and art, and travel. And it's just, well, like I said a minute ago, if you were rich and immortal and you could live this life and you're not trying to hurt anybody, you could subsist. Uh, Whatever needs to keep you going, your addiction, you could maintain, as junkies used to say, may still do. Um, then you'll be okay. And so it's weird. It's kind of like a horror movie, but it's kind of happy in a way. I mean, it's got a morose tone to the Adam character, but and bad things happen like to Ian and such, but it's not like horrific, but neither is it like goofy funny either. I mean, it's just kind of it's very to me it's organic writing. It's whimsical at times, it's romantic at times, it's dramatic at times, but it never like pushes one tone too far. It really keeps the even keel and kind of keeps this laser beam on the characters, especially the two main characters, and uh, just their characterization and their interaction and all of their quirks and hobbies and eccentricities uh, that have been, forged by the fact that they are rich and immortal. Um, so in the end, they're having to resort to being predators again, but they probably won't stay predators. They'll figure something out. I mean, they're both brilliant. Beautiful and brilliant, and well traveled, well cultured. Um, so I can see a lot of goth people loving this movie. Uh, but I like it. I mean, I love Hiddleston anyway, and this is my favorite Tilda Swinton role. Love John Hurt. Um, I just like the whole concept, just the way they live their lives. I mean, it does seem like a goth fairy tale, but and a lot of stories like that don't appeal to me that much. I mean, I wear all black and I like a lot of death rock and goth stuff, but I wouldn't call myself a goth really. And as far as my disposition, I don't passionately like only follow things to do with like vampires and graveyards and black latex and everything. I'm just stereotyping. I've dated some goth women, kind of self-identified that they were really more than goth. But they were partially embodied that some of that, but they weren't one dimensional either. And I don't like to be tied to one label per se. I mean, my ex fiance said sometimes she was a gothic hippie, and she did have elements of goth and hippie, and then she was a witch, and But then she had a funny, earthy side too. You know, she was a realized being who, yes, I still think about, and that's how I think that's how I think I am, and I think so. I'm not limited to like, oh God, I only listen to goth bands or I only watch certain kinds of movies, but I do enjoy a lot of those same music and kinds of movies, and I do wear all black. So you know, and silver jewelry and whatever, you know. So it's been a big influence on me, but I wouldn't say I'm a goth. But I can see goths loving this movie. I can see non-goths loving this movie. I can see a lot of people, being kind of lukewarm on it. In the context of Jarmusch's filmography, I like it. I think it stands right up with. I'm not saying it's better than, or I'm not saying any of these which one is better. That's a subjective thing. But I think it stands alongside Dead Man and Ghost Dog as kind of successful revisionist genre movies. You know, his take on genre movies. Now, I haven't seen Dead Don't Die, so I don't know if that succeeds or fails. But I will see it at some point. And that's it. So I've talked a long time, but I covered the three movies. I had a lot to say. I've been kind of storing it up. They're fresh in my mind. I've been thinking about them a lot. So I hope I haven't bored you to death and gone on too many unnecessary tangents. There were spoilers, but you know, there's some things I held back, and you know, I hope that you'll, you know, check out at least one or two of these movies if you're so inclined. Please leave a thumbs up if you don't mind. I'm really trying to kind of raise my profile, albeit very slowly. I don't expect like I'm going to be a PewDiePie or whatever that guy's name is, like an overnight YouTube superstar. Um, my next few videos, I'm going to eventually get back to this space rock thing I'm working on because I've sketched out like 10 or 20 episodes. It's just been hard to focus on that. I had house repairs and some other disasters. Uh, and then it's had some personal crises with somebody I'm close to, and it just very recently. And, you know, so that's kind of, but I'm kind of, and I'm broke. So I'm trying to raise money to survive and repair my house. But yeah, I'm putting a lot of stuff on eBay. Uh, that's slightly starting to move. I've got putting some of which I didn't realize were really valuable comic books for my collection, ones I never intended to sell. And then I'm looking them up and I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, I better sell this. Um, I'll talk about that another time. I might do a whole show on my eBay store and like beg y'all to buy something because I really need the money. If anybody wants to be a patron of the channel, you can buy me something to review that I need. Like the great Tim Tolbert did with the Godzilla Criterion set. That was a blessing. So if you want to contribute, you know, my email is going to be below. You know, if you want to PayPal me some money, if you can't, that's cool too. Or just, you know, support the channel. You know, subscribe, thumbs up. If you want to comment, but share. You know, share if you want on social media. I haven't used Twitter for this yet, and I may or may not, and I don't do Instagram anymore at all. But I'd like to spread it around because I'm also planning on doing more political videos and more focused ones, topic wise, not just my philosophies and my observations, like in some of the ones I've done, the few I've done, but on real events, real happenings, real figures to discuss. Lots going on, you know. Things are changing rapidly in our world, and the progressive movement has kind of splintered. But the people who are genuinely progressive and i.e., trying to improve the world, and are very socially liberal and economically want economic justice, social justice. These kind of people, the genuine ones, they're a little scattered. They've got a lot of opposition all around them, but the movement's growing, and a lot of it's the internet. And so, in that sense, even though we have huge obstacles against us and horrible things we cannot affect or change, there's a lot more of us than I ever thought there'd be possible, and that gives me some hope. But I'll talk about that another time. So, take care. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it.